Chapter 45 Letters. A few weeks later, it had been time for the boys to take the train to Hogwarts. Ginny, tired because close to her confinement, had decided to stay at home. Only Harry was accompanying them. That morning, the boys had submitted meekly to an alteration of features by magic, and Harry had done the same on himself. At the platform, nobody recognized them. Beside, obviously, Hermione, who spotted Harry straight away in the crowd, which annoyed him greatly. She was accompanying an hesitant Rose, with a demeanor that revealed excitement in getting the train, but also fearfulness. Her first year at Hogwarts hadn't been exactly carefree. However, Albus was soon on her side, keeping in the other hand, quite proudly, his new broom. James was behind them, sending threatening stare left, right, and center to discourage any possible bullying. As soon as his friend was spotted, however, he was gone to them to make himself recognized. Harry saw James pointing him to Francis, who gaped excitedly. He nodded a greeting, so the group, feeling encouraged by his friendliness, approached. Harry took the trouble to learn their names. He shook eager hands and submitted quite certainly to the insistent staring. James, in the meanwhile, had got back in the pre-Christmas mood of "I've got a famous father and I want to show it off," which, in any case, it was much better than the "I hate my father" one. After a hasty goodbye, he was sprinting toward the train with his owl, followed by his friends that were throwing glances behind their shoulders to him. Harry helped Albus and Rose with their trunks, and enveloped in a cloud of steam, they were soon gone. Harry felt a lump in his throat seem then go. It had been pleasant to have the house full again, despite half of the holiday had been spent in a sulk from James' part. It was rather hard to have them away for so long, but at the same time he had the baby to look forward to, and he was sure that in the space of 3 weeks, if this child would have revealed itself even only half challenging as the others had been, he would have been pining bitterly for the silence he was now scorning. Hermione was soon on his side, ready to walk back toward a safe spot where she could disapparate. "Do you like my new look?" he said playfully, running his hand in a mane of thick sandy hair. She studied critically. "I don't know. I think dark suits you better." He chuckled. "I still don't know how you always manage to recognize me, no matter how careful I am in casting the spells. You make me doubt my skills." "The spells are very well casted," she said, halting in front of a bookshop, peering at the books on the display. "But you forget that I've known you since you were 11. I know you almost better than myself. I would recognize you amid hundreds," she said, resuming her walk. Harry smiled. "When are you leaving?" he asked. Now that Rose was gone, they were surely going to return in Romania pretty soon. "Tomorrow. Hugo is starting school in 2 days and Ron needs to be back at the office." Harry nodded. They were now outside the station, walking toward Harry's place, heading for the small alley she always used when meeting in the morning to go to the ministry. The weather wasn't inviting. Fall was getting closer. The day was foggy and slightly chilly. They were walking side to side, and Harry was trying to reconcile himself with the thought of saying goodbye. It had been nice to have her there, and after the conversation at Hogwarts, their relationship was kind of back to what it had been previous to her declaration. Although not exactly the same. Despite what was said that day, he hadn't been able to forget what came out from her mouth. He was too deep a feeling the one she had showed to allow him to be forgetful of it. He still felt constrained in his behavior, scared to pain her more with his affectionate demeanor. But, at least, they were back to confidence. She had been invited many times to their place, and Ginny had finally overcome her jealousy. Harry had the feeling that they had a talk between each other, but he didn't want to know. However, they seemed very relaxed together, and Harry was glad of it. He didn't want to feel responsible of a breach in a friendship that had lasted for as long as his. He didn't know if he would have written to her, and vice versa, during her absence, but he was relieved in knowing that if in need, she was there without an impediment. He had learned to be careful with her sentiments, and moreover, he felt confident that she could retain her friendship. "Do you think I should try to make up with Ron?" he asked, somewhat hesitant, voicing a question it had been bothering him since their last encounter. He was hating Ron for a very good reason, but also for many wrong ones. Hermione heaved a big sigh. "I don't know, Harry. It's something you must decide. I see it difficult to recuperate the friendship exactly as it was, but then you could aim at being able to see him without wanting to beat him to a pulp. That would be already a great improvement." "I think I already got over that stage," Harry answered, laughing heartily. "But I still feel a lot of irritation when I see him." "So then, don't push yourself. It will happen when it needs to happen. And if it won't," she shrugged her shoulders, "now that we are away, it's less important than before. It is not as we are going to meet each other every day." They walked slowly, knowing that a goodbye was waiting for them, a cold wind blowing on their faces. "Why are you still with him?" Harry asked, looking at the busy street in front of them, his hands in his pockets. Hermione looked sideways at him, and she took her time to answer. "We already canvassed the reasons. I don't love him, but I cannot leave him. Nothing is changed except that now you know one of the reasons why I don't love him anymore." Harry didn't answer, lost in his reflections. He never liked the idea of the two separating. But wasn't it wrong to be with somebody not only without love, but loving somebody else? Harry couldn't think to anything worse. Hermione glanced at him quickly. "Harry, I know what you are thinking. You live in a very happy relationship, and it seems odd for you anything different. But there is not only black or white, love or no love. There are many shades in between. Like, there would be many reasons for me to divorce, but there are as many not to." They were soon in front of the small alley, and Hermione halted, facing Harry. It would mean, between other things, to divorce the Weasley family. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. It has become my family, and I don't want to lose it. And this, Harry could understand it quite well, and could not condemn it. He still wasn't sure whether it was right to stay together without love, but exactly as he hated Ron for one good reason, and many wrong ones, he could sympathize with Hermione for staying with Ron for no good reason, but many wrong ones. The moment of farewell was there, and Harry, uneasy, still not very much sure of what he could dare or not dare in his behavior toward her, kept his hands in his pocket, repressing all those marks of tenderness that would have marked their previous salutations. "Goodbye, and take care," he whispered, hoping that the next time they would see each other, she would have loved him a bit less, allowing him to love her a bit more. Hermione smiled sadly. "See you at Christmas." His inside flinched hearing that word, but he had 4 months to prepare himself for that moment, and he was determined in succeeding not to let bad feelings overturn him. He had 4 months to get ready to be a comfort to Ginny if needed, and be present for his sons, helping them to affront what was going to be a serious challenge for the Wall family. He knew he would have managed. He just needed to find the strength. And despite many times he had thought to have run out, he had always found it unexpectedly there in the end. With a parting smile, he started to walk toward home. He had taken only a few steps, however, when he heard his name called aloud. He stopped. Hermione was running in his direction. She threw her arms around him and, standing on tiptoe, smacked a kiss on each of his cheeks, saying slyly, "It doesn't feel right otherwise." Harry laughed. "You are right. He didn't feel right." "Forget everything that passed. We are friends. I don't want anything to change. Don't overthink about how to behave. Just be yourself as you said you would, and you'll be sure to do always the right thing," she said with firmness, keeping his face in her chilly hands. Harry took them in his own and rubbed them to warm them up, kissing the tip of her fingers. "Thank you." She nodded, and slipping away from him, walked back briskly to the alley, turning just before to disappear to wave a last time. Then the crack he heard announced him that she was gone. Only the next day, while Harry was reading the Daily Prophet on the sofa after the first day back from work, he saw Regina, the owl, flying toward the window. He opened it. Tied to his leg, there was a scroll addressed to him from James. Mechanically, he went to the kitchen to get a bowl of water for the owl, that was smoothing her feathers all ruffled by the drizzling outside, while wondering about the scroll. Usually, James and Albus' letters were addressed to both he and Ginny, and usually they were writing every fortnight or so. One so soon after their departure was unexpected, and Harry felt a slight concern knowing the boy's propension for rules breaking. Asking himself in what kind of mess his son had managed to get into in the space of scarcely 24 hours, he opened the scroll. "Dad, what the heck did you do here? Yesterday, as soon as we got to the dormitory, we heard the fifth-year girls screaming as if they were possessed. They flung in the common room looking for me, and honest to God, I was scared for my life. They surrounded me before I had time to understand what was going on, and one of them grabbed me and asked if you had been here. She was so red, it seemed she was about to explode. When I say that you actually did, they all started to shriek so loud they almost deafened me. Some were laughing hysterically, some were actually crying. What the hell did you do here? McGonagall has been forced to intervene, and she was quite annoyed, I can tell you. Not at all surprised, though, strangely enough. They all got a calming potion, but I still didn't get what happened. Don't ever do it again." However, while I was taking the piss out of them with Francis, Ophelia, a girl in my ear, heard me and called me a show-off prick. I think I fancy the girl. Say hello to Mum. James. Not many days later, he got one from Albus. "Dad! I got in! I got in! We had a tryout yesterday and I got in! You would never guess in what role. I'm a seeker! I got my snitch in 2.37 minutes, way faster than all the others. Greta, who was the best after me, got it in 4.56 minutes. The captain was overjoyed. We are starting training straight away. He said that with me we are surely gonna win the cup. Last year, Slytherin won it, and he almost cried. However, today, while I was doing some warming up, I heard some Slytherin saying that I got in just because I'm your son. I was a bit cast down, and I told James. He said not to worry and not to listen to them. He said also that unfortunately bludgers are uncontrollable during matches and incidents happen. The next one is against Slytherin. If we win the cup, can I have an all too? Hug mum from me, Albus. Chapter 46. Sunrise. A few days later, he was sitting on the sofa with Ginny. It was already 11 o'clock in the evening. He felt shattered by a very intense workday. He was enjoying Ginny cuddling while dozing off slightly. Ginny had had some of the Witch Weekly pictures framed, and they were hanging now over the wall. She was very pleased and couldn't keep her eyes from them. She was making various remarks at which Harry was replying somehow sleepily. By the way, I meant to ask you for already some time how much we got for the interview, he asked, yawning. 972,000 gallons net of taxes. Silence fell in the room. Harry was suddenly quite awake. He widened his eyes, sat up, and looked at her, mystified. 972,000? He repeated stupidly, thinking to have misunderstood. Ginny nodded, and a few sickles, and some nuts. Harry was dumbfounded. 972,000? He asked, now loudly. Ginny rolled her eyes annoyed. Yes, Harry, yes, 972,000. What the heck? It's more than I'm making here, Harry blurted out, amazed. Harry, it was a long time you didn't give an interview. Plus, they knew they were going to sell like crazy. I'm sure we could have asked even more if we would have just wanted to. A long silence succeeded this affirmation. A silence in which Harry was making a fast calculation. If he would have given an interview every, let's say, 6 months, his descendants wouldn't have needed to work for several generations. Under this revelation, the interview seemed somehow less of a bother than what it had been really. He had only answered a few questions and signed thousands of photographs and spent hours being ordered about and being objectified for the next weeks, notwithstanding that in the end it had been totally useless for both his purposes. Nah, they can get to work after all. Harry, I know, right? It's crazy, he exclaimed, thinking she was following his same train of thought. We will need a larger Gringotts vote soon. No, Harry. And I think you might even consider dropping your job if you want to. I could drop mine too, as a matter of fact, but I don't know if... Harry! She exclaimed, interrupting him. Harry halted and looked at her. What? He asked. She was gazing fixedly in front of her, like if listening to something. No answer came, however. She was immobile, staring blankly at the wall. She suddenly made a grimace. What? He asked again. I think my water just broke, she whispered, not altering her expression. What? He asked now in alarm. But it's not due for 2 weeks yet. I know, but I'm pretty sure it's happening now. Harry stared at her a few seconds, and then, realizing what all this meant, sprang from the sofa. Okay, keep calm, let's not panic, he ranted in a fit of pure panic. I am calm, Harry, she answered very composedly. What do we do? Do we need to go to some mango ride? He asked, his mind fuzzy, walking about the room. Shall we apparate? Can you? A porky, maybe? He blabbed in agitation while trying to wear a jacket without success. Harry, calm down, Ginny ordered, rising unsteadily from the sofa. First thing, go to the bedroom. Under the bed, there is a bag. Take it. There are my things inside. Harry nodded, repeating stupidly fragment of her sentence without comprehending the meaning of it. When he put the pieces together, he dropped the jacket and exclaimed, "Right, okay, bag under the bed," and dashed upstairs to retrieve it. While he was in the bedroom, he heard a scream coming from downstairs that made him cringe. He grasped the bag and flew down the stairs. Ginny had a hand on her belly, supporting herself against the table, her face contorted in a grimace. "Contraction has already started," she said, taking a big breath. "Okay, right, okay, I got the bag. What now?" He stuttered, trying to keep the agitation under control. "Send the Patronus to my healer to tell her we are coming, and send one to Mum too." Without even knowing what he was doing, he grasped his wand, and one after the other, 2 phonics shot out of it. 2 of the easiest Patronus ever performed. Probably not the most efficient, though. God only knows if the meaning they had to convey would have been clear with a mind so hazy as he had casting them. Once that done, he waited expectantly to receive some other orders, his ability in any kind of rational thought utterly incapacitated. "I don't think I should disapparate, and neither take a portkey, not in this condition. We'll need a cab." "It's almost midnight. We haven't got a telephone. Where do I find one? I told you we had to get a telephone." "Harry, find the damn cab now!" she ordered. Harry retrieved his jacket and the bag from the floor, shooting out of the door, followed unsteadily by Ginny. He ran to the main street and assaulted the false cab that crossed his path. Not even 10 minutes later, they were in front of the neglected facade of St. Mungo's. The cab driver dropped there with a very suspicious expression, wondering what they could possibly wanted to do at midnight in front of an abandoned apartment. "Are you sure you don't want to go to a hospital?" he asked while they were getting off, glimpsing Ginny, who had another contraction in the meantime. "No thanks, we are fine," Harry answered between clenched teeth, supporting Ginny, hoping he would get out of the way as soon as possible to allow them to pass unobserved through the shop window. When he finally drove off, they were soon inside. The healer was waiting for them. Apparently his Patronus had been understandable after all. Kindly, she let them use the service lift and not the main one. The hospital at that hour was almost empty, but there were still people about, and Harry was still in control of his faculties enough to want to avoid the event to become public. She gave Ginny a private room in a separate aisle, and after having checked her, she went out to assist other patients. Ginny started to pace up and down, time to time emitting barely human screams. Harry, after scarcely an hour of it, was past endurance. He grabbed by the collar the force healer who was passing in front of the room and hissed furiously, "Can you not give her something, for God's sake? A potion, a spell, anything?" The healer, a tiny bald man with silver spectacles, squeaked terrified that they couldn't give her anything yet, and not without her healer approbation force. "Go and fetch her then," he bellowed, pushing the poor man toward the direction where Ginny's healer had disappeared. He was back in the room and got Ginny's hand to reassure her. She took it, and breathing heavily, she sat on the bed trying to smile. "Don't worry, Harry. It's everything." She halted suddenly, her body rigid. She squeezed Harry's hand so tightly he almost had a creak coming from it. Then she screamed so loud Harry almost fainted out of tension. He had assisted to all her deliveries, but every time felt like the fourth. It was one of the most dreadful and terrifying things he assisted in his life, and he had assisted to many terrifying things. But witnessing the loved one's screams in so much pain, not be able to do anything to help, is one of the most unbearable things on earth. He was reminded when in Malfoy's manor they could hear Hermione being tortured upstairs while locked in the cell, unable to do anything to put a stop to it. Ron was frantic, exactly as he was now. The only difference was that eventually they had managed to break free and rescue her. Here, he couldn't do anything if not having his hand crushed to powder. As soon as the contraction was gone, he dashed out of the room looking for the healer. She was calmly having a tea in the break room. Trying to master himself in an appearance of composure, he asked politely for her to come and check on Ginny again, as he thought she was quite ready. She smiled sympathetic, seeing his constrained expression. "Potter, it's not time yet. It might even still need a few hours. Why don't you get the tea too? It might help you relax," she said, stirring some milk in her cup while gesturing toward the chair opposite her. "What the? A few hours? A few hours of this? Relax? A tea?" He didn't trust himself in speaking. He couldn't be as rough as with the other healer, not with the woman. Putting all his efforts not falling in an escalation, he took the cup from the healer's hand, left it on the table, grasped one of her arms, and without a word tracked her in Ginny's room, where she was again screaming. The healer, when the contraction had passed, smiling tenderly, addressed Ginny. "Your husband seems on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Shall I give him a potion?" Ginny chuckled feebly. The healer made her lie on the delivery bed to check the situation. Her smile vanished quickly. "I actually think it might be about time," she muttered. Harry shot her an exasperated look. "Didn't I say so?" he hissed. Without answering, she disappeared swiftly from the room, bringing back a few minutes later a potion for her to swallow and the tiny healer who threw a fearful glass in Harry's direction. After that, everything became hectic. The potion made very little effect. Ginny was in much pain, and Harry, through the link that united them in better or worse, felt it all. He didn't relinquish her hand for an instant, finding himself following stupidly the instruction given to Ginny with her. When the baby was finally out, and they heard it crying at the top of its tiny lungs, Ginny's hand relaxing his own, he felt loosen up too. He had been so tense and empathizing that he almost felt as if he had given birth himself. The baby was soon in her arms, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. "Isn't the most beautiful thing you ever saw?" she asked between tears, holding the bundle close to her breast. "Indeed," he only said, looking smitten with this new tiny wrinkly red little being. He kissed Ginny many times over. "You have been amazing," he whispered in her ear. The two healers were bustling around them to check everything was fine, but they were lost in contemplation of this new creature and didn't have eyes for anything else. A couple of hours later, Ginny was sleeping in a fresh, clean bed. The baby was in the cradle just beside. Harry was exhausted, but he wouldn't get any sleep just yet. He took the baby in his arms and sat down, contemplating it. It had got already some black hair on its tiny head, and despite no features were really yet discernible, he was sure that one belonged to him. As every time before, he was overwhelmed by the notion that a new human being was born to his earth. As every time before, he was overwhelmed by the notion that a new human being was born to this earth. A human being ready to love, laugh, cry, get upset. A human being ready to live. And it was part of him, connected to him in an indivisible way. He had created this stunning new creature. It was certainly a responsibility, but it was something elating. And he never felt so proud of himself as in that moment. He thought about his parents and felt close to them as probably never before. This was what they felt when they had him in their arms for the first time. And he really missed them now. He felt he would have loved to share this moment with them, to tell them that their sacrifice hadn't been vain. Thanks to it, he had lived and learned to love. He had in his turn given life to 4 amazing children, 2 of them growing to become very decent adults. A tranquil sadness pervaded his mind thinking about his parents. He truly hoped with all his might that after death there was something more, and they could see this stunning creature and they could see him holding it. He knew very well by now the sentiment that drove them in putting the son forward without hesitation against Voldemort, knowing that they were going to be killed to save him. He would have done the same for any of his children, the love for them much stronger than the love for his own life. The realization of what he had achieved in his life was poignant in him then. With this new baby in his arms, he thanked again all the people that had given his life to help him survive to this moment. And the happiness swelled, sweeping away the sadness. The happiness in having the family he had. He was a miracle. This was his greatest achievement. Nothing less than that. Out of the window, the sun was rising, projecting a pink light in the room. The first morning of this beautiful child. He stirred slightly his arms. He stirred slightly, opening its eyes, and looked at him, moving something painful inside Harry, in remembrance of the same moment 7 years before with another child. Another child that would never have the chance to become the amazing adult she was surely going to be. He blinked, trying to keep back those tears that were emerging, but one escaped, falling on the cheek of this new child of him. He brushed it away gently. "Welcome to this world," he whispered. "You'll have a great time, I hope. It might get tough here and then. There will be moments in which you will be afraid, or you'll suffer. Perhaps there might be a moment in which you will think you might not bear life any longer. And perhaps, once you turn 14, you might think you hate me." He chuckled and then continued smiling. "But it doesn't change anything. Whatever it will happen, imperfect as I am, and despite all the blunders I'll make, I'm your father, and I'll always be there for you." The baby grasped his thumb and made one of those grimaces only infant can make, making Harry laughing softly. He laid the baby back in the cradle and silently got out of the room. He closed the door behind him and rested a moment on it, reflecting. The swirl of emotion felt was subsiding, leaving space for many other thoughts. He rubbed his eyes, weary and confused. The corridor was empty. Harry knew that somewhere in the aisle the Weasley family was waiting for news, and he ought to go to them, but he needed some more time to make order in his mind. A hooting disturbed the stillness of the corridor, making him jolt. "Dad!" it said. "What are you doing here?" Harry asked, startled, recognizing James on the other side of the corridor. "Bill asked Longbottom to send us here with the portkey," he explained, walking briskly toward him. "They are all in the room around the corner. I just couldn't keep on waiting and I sneaked out with an excuse. What's wrong?" he concluded, seeing his expression. How's Mom? He asked with a slight alarm. She's perfectly fine, Harry answered, forcing a smile. Sleeping? And James uttered, visibly torn if breaking his denial with a question about the baby. Harry saved him the distress. The baby's fine too. So what's wrong? Harry was about to answer he was only tired. That would have been the answer given at the beginning of the summer. The appropriate answer to give to a child. But somehow everything had changed those few months. He looked at his own son, and perhaps for the first time his eyes were open on the fact that he wasn't a child any longer. He could finally see not what his mind was used to picture when looking at him, but what he was for real. A young adult, clever, with acute feelings, and ready to understand about grown-ups matters. It had never been easy for Harry to be open about his feelings. It was too much like showing weakness, something he didn't feel allowed to indulge. But he was starting to understand the necessity of making some effort, especially toward James. He was of the most importance to show him how valuable he considered him. And it could be done treating him like the adult he was becoming. He needed to show him his trust. Come with me, he said, opening the door and gesturing him to follow. Just be quiet, we don't want to wake up Mom. Once in the semi-darkness of the room, he took a chair and beckoned him to sit. He went to get the baby and made it to rest on James' lap. He looked terrified and tried to oppose himself, but Harry shushed him gently and quietly arranged his arms properly. When he finally set it there, James was a mixture of deep fright and clumsiness, but he was also utterly mesmerized, which reminded him forcingly the first time he had held him. Taking another chair, sat beside him. It's a girl, he avowed. James nodded, his eyes glued on the tiny new being. That terrifies me, he said, managing to push out this truth. James widened his eyes and, tearing them from the baby, glued them on him. This possibility terrified me from the very beginning. I hoped for a boy, he continued, marveling at the easiness in which everything was tumbling up after the first difficult avowal. Why? James mouthed. Because of your sister. I don't want this child to take her place. She's too important. I don't want her to replace Lily. James shifted his gaze from him to the baby, lost in meditation. I see, he said, and then added downcast. It'd be like when Albus was born and took my place. Harry placed an arm around his shoulders and shook his head eager. James, this idea you are feeding is totally wrong. Albus never took your place, and neither has Lily. You have got your personal space that cannot be affected by any of them, exactly as they've got their own. You all have the same importance to my eyes. There is not one who prevails upon the other. James was silent for a moment, and then added, If what you said is true, you have nothing to fear from her, he said, nodding toward the baby who was sleeping peacefully. She'll have her own space too. Harry was struck by his words. James was right. He hadn't been lying telling him what she did, and if it was so for all his children, he was going to work the same for this one. And anyway, I've got the feeling she will turn out to be very different from Lily, he said with a sly smile, gently rubbing a lock of her black hair. They sniggered softly over the shared thread that was now passed to the new baby too. I hoped for a girl, James said under his voice, finally breaching the pretended aversion showed since day one. Harry was surprised by this unexpected admission. Why? James tilted his head on one side, rocking slightly and unwarily the baby who had just emitted a muffled wail. Dunno, he muttered, frowning. I like to have a sister, he said, somewhat grim. And I also thought about a name, he mumbled, bashful. Which one? Harry asked keen. I'm not going to tell. It's silly. You are just going to take the piece, and you won't want to use it anyway, he muttered, soaring up. I won't take the piece, and I can't use it, as we already chose a name. It's already registered, so you can say it. James, encouraged, without looking at him, gabbled sheepishly. I thought about Sunrise. It seemed cute. And it feels right. Mom, and, you, everything was, and now is. He was stammering in a visible difficulty, and Harry, to bring him back at ease, told him off. I know, you are right. It fits. No name seemed more appropriate, considering on something so beautiful as this child was in fact born from a sheer darkness made of grief, despair, and violence, and how, moreover, with their only presence in those otherwise bleak months, had brought the sought-for light they were so much in need. He smiled, thinking how his son, despite his denial and accuses, had grasped something so deep. It's a cool name. James shrugged. Yeah, it was just an idea. I knew you would have picked a different one. What did you choose? Harry smirked. We didn't choose. I only wanted you to spill the beans. James looked affronted, but Henry, taking a sudden resolution that was sure would have met Ginny's approbation, continued. But I guess we have just chosen it together, don't we? Say hello to Sunrise, he said, tapping lightly her cheek and smiling at James. And the beam that spread there made him understand, in an instant, that this was the happy thought that will have sparked his son's future Patronus. I dreamt again about Lily tonight. He was strangely vivid. I was in my room, and I heard a noise from the corridor. It was dark all around, but a light was coming from Lily's room. When I approached it, she was there, playing with a rabbit plush in the morning light, like if she never left. She smiled and greeted me cheerfully. I was amazed in finding her there. I kneeled and I hugged her with all my strength. I could sense on my fingers her hair, and I could detect the smell of milk and biscuits that always accompanied her. It felt so real. I told her how happy I was to find out she wasn't dead really. I asked her not to leave again. I cried then. I couldn't contain it. The relief was so intense. She told me not to, because she wasn't going to go away. I woke up then. I had tears on my face. I brushed them away. It's odd though. I thought the pain in finding out it had been only a dream would have been excruciating. And it had been. But only for a minute. It felt better afterward. It had been consoling in a way, like being able to meet her again. I thought about it the whole day. It's amazing how dreams can feel so real. I felt better than I felt in months. Serene. I decided to share it with Jenny in the evening. It seemed right. She cried a bit when I did so, but then she smiled. She told me she had dreamt about her too. We took the picture of me and Lily from the bedside table in Lily's room, and we hung it on the wall in the living room together with all the others' family picture. I don't think we'll take them down again. And this was the end of the second book of 3, written by Scribbling Aloud and read by Scribbling Aloud.